Hey, what's up creators? Today we're going to be very quickly showing you how we can set up beautiful water for use in oceans, rivers, and as a bonus, by the end of this video we're also going to be showing you how we can set up buoyancy so we have objects floating on our fluid simulations. It's going to be a really fun tutorial. We're not only going to be showing you how to set up our oceans and our rivers, but we're also going to be showing you how we can customize these. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into Unreal Engine 5 and make this happen. Inside of Unreal Engine 5, the very first thing that we need to do is we need to enable a couple of plugins, those being the water and the landmass plugins, as these are required. To do this, we're going to go up to Edit and then Plugins. Give this a couple of seconds to load, and then what I'm going to search for is water. We're going to find our experimental water plugin. Make sure this is enabled. And then secondly, we're going to be looking for our landmass plugin. Again, this is also in beta. Once you've enabled these by clicking on the tick box, you're going to be asked to restart the engine. I've done this already, so we can hop straight into Unreal Engine 5. What I want you to do for the purpose of this tutorial, just go up to File, New Level, and create a basic level. We're going to delete the floor in here. We're not going to need this as we're going to be using Unreal Engine 5's landscape system for this. So that being said, to create a landscape, we're going to go to Select Mode in the top left hand corner and select Landscape. Then inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to create a landscape with the default settings. Now, bear in mind for this, make sure that you enable Edit Layers. This is what landmass is going to be using and is going to allow our water system to actually edit this landscape of ours. What I want you to do, if you've got a material that you want to use, for me, I've got one called Beach. You can go ahead and put this in here. If not, no worries, just go ahead and press Create. Once your landscape has been created, you're going to end up with something that looks like this. It's just a regular landscape, just like any other landscape, and with this, if I wanted to, I can start sculpting on this. Okay, now that we have our landscape set up, we can finally show you how we can create this water. And this landscape stuff is incredibly important as our water system does use the landscape mode for everything. That being said, to create the water, again, really simple, and we're going to do that in just a few seconds, and then we're going to be customizing that. Let's start off with our ocean. To create our ocean, it's really straightforward. To do this, what we're going to do is we're simply going to go in and we're going to bring in our all classes, and then with this we can start typing in water, and for me I'm going to be using water body ocean. Click on this, and as soon as you do that, you're going to notice straight away our water is going to be coming into this. Now once you bring in your ocean, it's going to look exactly like I've got here. What you can see I've got here is I have got my ocean, and it pretty much just goes out infinitely from where we are. What we also have is our island that has been created for our fluid simulation. Just like I mentioned before, our landscape system does work with the water system, so when we start adjusting the size of the ocean, it's going to adjust our island or our landscape to fit. Now, when it comes to the water system, there is lots and lots of different settings that we can tweak to change the appearance. Or what we're going to do right now is we're going to show you how we can tweak the size of our island. Then we'll show you how to change the appearance of the water. To change the size of the island, all we need to do is simply select our water body ocean. With this selected, what we're going to notice is that we have these spline points all around our island here. And we can select these by simply clicking on the little white dots. These are how we're going to be controlling the size of this island. What I can do is I can select one of these, and then I can move these, and what you're going to see happen there is we are able to start shaping the size of our island. So feel free to just go in, select these points, move them around until you get the size of the island that you want. We can also select these controls here to change the curve on these to customize the shape of this a little bit more. So now you can see I've got a really funky looking island right here. Lastly, what I can do is I can also add additional spline points by selecting one, holding down Alt, dragging from this, and what's going to happen when we do that is it's going to add in an additional spline point. So we can really customize this to the exact shape that we want. What I want you to do is just go ahead and get comfortable working with these splines and get comfortable customizing how our ocean is going to look. So at this point, we now know how we can change the size of our island using these splines and our curves. So I'm sure a lot of you are going to be really interested now in taking a look at how we can customize the water. So that's going to be things like changing the color, changing the size of the waves, and all of that good stuff. Let's hop back into Unreal Engine 5 and show you how we can do this. So inside of Unreal Engine 5, to change how the water is going to look, and it already looks fantastic, might I add, we've got two ways to do that. First and foremost, we've got the material, which is going to change the appearance in terms of color and that kind of stuff. What we also have is what's called a wave asset. This wave asset is going to control how the waves are going to be appearing, and that's going to be the minimum amplitude, maximum amplitude, the length of the waves, all of that important information. Let's start off with the waves asset to control how the simulation is going to work. To find this, what we're going to do is, with the water body ocean selected, we're going to go down to wave, wave source, and we're going to find this water waves asset. Double click on this to open it up. Inside here, we can find our fluid simulation. And there's a few really important settings that we can go in and tweak with this to control how our ocean's going to look. So the first of which is our wave lengths. This is how long our wave is going to be. And right now they're very random. It's currently going between 521 and 6,000. We can reduce this or increase this if we wanted to. I could set this to be a little less random, so it's a bit more uniform, like this, or I could even just increase this number as high as I like, and it's going to be a little bit more random, but you can see because I've set this number so high, it's just huge. For me, what I like to do when it comes to the waves is to try and keep things close to what we have here right now. If we feel like these waves are too long, we might want to just simply half that value as opposed to going in and just doubling it or really reducing it. For me, this still feels a little bit short in terms of the wavelength, so it might actually be a number closer to about 5,000 that we work with. And for me, you know what? I quite like that. The next setting that we've got here, and this is really important, is our minimum and our maximum amplitude. The amplitude is basically just the size of the waves. And we can see here we're going from 4 to 80. And if we look close up, we have actually got some really big waves. Now, if you wanted the ocean to be a little bit calmer, you'd basically just take your maximum amplitude and set this down to a value like 20. And when we do this, you can see our waves and our ocean is going to be a lot calmer than it was before. If you're turning down the amplitude, you might also then want to turn down the max wavelength. And I can set this to something like 2000 if I wanted to. And you can see now, this is going to look a lot more natural. So what I'm encouraging you to do now is just play around with that minimum wavelength, maximum wavelength, minimum amplitude, and our maximum amplitude to control how this water is going to look. The last setting that you might want to take a look at is your wind dominant angle direction. If we set this to something like 90, we can make sure that the wind is dominating mostly from 90 degrees. I'm not going to go into this now, but feel free to play around with those settings if that's something that you want to do. Where you should be at this point though is very much comfortable with tweaking all of those simulation settings to get the look that you're after. So now we should know how we can customize the way the fluid simulation is going to work in terms of the waves, the length of those waves, the size of those waves, and also the direction. What we're going to do now is we're going to be taking a look at how we can change the color of our water, as that's something which is really important and I'm sure a lot of you are going to want to do. Let's hop back into Unreal Engine 5 and do just that. So inside of Unreal Engine 5, we can customize the water color really easily. And that is because ultimately our water is going to be using a material. And we can find this by clicking on the water, scrolling down until we get to wave material. Now, if we take a look at this wave material here, we've got one really important setting, or two really important settings for that matter. We've got our absorption and we've got our foam scattering. Taking a look at our absorption, as this is our main material or main parameter here we're going to be tweaking, we can click on this and we can change it. And you can see right now it's currently sort of a light white and a blue. If I wanted to, I could tweak this to be a little bit on the red side if I wanted to, or the purple side. Maybe even the green. So let's set this to green, press OK, and as you're going to see there, it's now going to become this green color. Now that might not be exactly what you want, so feel free to just keep going in there in that material and changing that until you find the look that you like. If you want it to be a little bit darker, by all means, feel free to click on that and make it a little bit darker. Not too dark because you'll end up with this ugly mess that I have there, but just go in and go into there and just tweak that until you get what you need. So for me, I'm just going to be setting this to a nice blue value again, just like that. And because I didn't go too saturated, I've actually ended up with mostly clear water here. Not too realistic, so again, I just go into my absorption, I can turn up that saturation a little bit, press OK, and as you can see there, it's going to start changing. And again, I can go in there as many times as I like, just going in and tweaking that until I get a watercolor that works for me. What you might also want to do is, inside of here, you might also want to adjust your scattering and your foam scattering colors there. Feel free to go into here, press those values and tweak them. So you can see now, by going into my scattering and setting this to a pink, we now have a mostly blue sea, but we also have a slight scatter of pink in there as well, but we're still getting those blue highlights. So those are your two important settings, absorption, scattering. You can also use foam scattering too, but scattering is the one that you want to work with. Okay, we now have our water material set up and everything is looking exactly how we want to. What we're going to do now is we're going to be moving on to showing you how we can set up rivers using this water system. Again, this is really straightforward and really easy. Let's hop back into Unreal Engine 5 and get that started. So inside of Unreal Engine 5, to create rivers, again, really straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to go up to the Create section here, All Classes, type in Water, and this time we're going to be going with Water Body River. And what you're going to see happen there is it's actually going to create a river for us, and with this it's actually raised our landscape because of where the river's located. And with this river, again, I can just click this, drag it, and I can place it anywhere within my landscape. It doesn't have to be this high. By all means, I can lower this into the ground, and if I wanted to, I can even lower this below the landscape if I wanted to, until we get something that looks like this. Our river, just like everything else in the water system, is going to be powered by splines. And with those splines, I can actually adjust all of those different points. You can see these splines highlighted again by the white dots. If you ever can't see them, just make sure you're coming out of that game mode by pressing G. But with these splines, I can select them and I can move them to control the shape of my river. And if I want to, I can take this all the way out to here. Again, what I can also do is I can add additional spline points by holding down Alt and then just dragging out. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to very quickly make sure that my river feeds into my ocean just like this. And you can see the material is actually going to do a really good job here of blending this into our ocean. Now, with this river, we can actually customize how all of this is going to work. What I mean by that is we can actually adjust all of these on the spline points. If you feel like your river's moving too fast, we can select on a specific spline point and we can change some of the settings that we've got for this, such as our river width or our velocity. Let's say on this corner we want it to be quite tight. I can go to my river width, change it from 2048 down to a value like 500. And now we have a very thin river here, or something like 1,000. If it's going a little bit too slow or too fast, we can change the velocity. It's currently set to 128. I might change this down to something like 20 to make it move a little bit slower. If that's too slow, feel free to change it to something like 50, but what you're going to see happen then is it's going to continue to go around this corner, it's going to bend, but it's going to have the speed, and all of this is per spline. So if I want to, I can go down the river, find my next spline point here. If I want to change the speed it is here, we can see that's 128. Again, I can change this down to something like 20 to make it be a little bit calmer, and then it's just going to blend more naturally into this. There's a lot that you've got to learn when it comes to water and getting it to blend, but just tweak those two values, river width and velocity. Also, don't forget you can adjust your depth to change how deep your river is going to be. So I can take my depth here from 150 and I could set it to be something like 20 to be a nice shallow river, and we can see that there. Or I could set this to something like 200 to make it be quite deep. And I can just test this even more by setting this to 5,000, and now we have a really deep river. And just like the ocean, if we go underneath this, we can see we've got the post-processing effect, which makes everything blue and actually feel like it's under the water, which is fantastic. Okay, so at this point we now have our rivers and we have our water, and they're looking fantastic and they behave exactly in the way that we want them to. This last little bonus section, we're now going to be showing you how we can set up buoyancy inside of Unreal Engine 5. So we're essentially going to be able to take cubes or even boats and have them float on our water and move with our water simulation. Again, this is really easy and straightforward to set up. Let's hop into Unreal Engine 5 and create a blueprint to make this happen. So inside of Unreal Engine, the very first thing that we need to do then is we actually need to create a brand new blueprint class anywhere in your content browser. I'm going to right click and give this the name, or the type, actor, and give this the name floatable_object. You can call this absolutely anything you like. I'm then going to go ahead and double click on this to open it up. Inside of here, first things first, we need to add the object that we want to float. For me, I'm simply going to add in a static mesh. This mesh can be absolutely anything. For me, I'm just going to go to the details panel on the right hand side where it says static mesh, and then going to choose cube. Important setting when it comes to this, we need to make sure that simulate physics is turned on this. We can then also set the custom mass here for the object. I'm going to make sure this is turned on also, and make sure that this is set to 100. With this done, we then need to add in the buoyancy component. So go to add in the top left and add in your buoyancy. Now if we go ahead and compile this, we can bring this into our scene to test it out. So I'm going to go to my content drawer and bring in my new floatable object. I'm going to make this float just above the water here and press play. And what you're going to see there is the object is just going to fall to the ground and it's just going to sit there. It's not actually got any buoyancy yet. And if we move this a little bit further away, we can test that. Just go straight down under the water and just continues floating. Now, the reason why it has no buoyancy yet is because we've not actually added any points at which it should be floating or be buoyant to. With a boat, generally the bottom will have all of the buoyancy and it will kind of balance on that. With this cube, we can add this in all as part of the buoyancy component. So what I'm going to do with my buoyancy component here in my floatable object, I can go to the details, and this is where we need to create a pontoon. Like I mentioned, the pontoon is just the buoyancy point. We can see it's currently got 0 array elements. We're going to go ahead and add one of these in. Now for me, the relative location you can see here is X, Y, and Z. I'm just going to set this to about 50 here. What's also really important is that you make your static mesh the default scene route. You can do this by selecting it and dragging it over default scene routes. Now, with our pontoon set up to 0, 0, and 50, we can go ahead and compile this and press play. What you're going to see here now is the cube is going to float. And we can get a better view of this by simply detaching from the player controller. And we can see that the cube is now actually floating and it's moving with the waves. And that's absolutely perfect. So now that we have this set up and we have our buoyancy point and our cube is actually, well, buoyant, we can then see we're able to push that too, and it's just going to float off. And if I was to put this in a river, it's currently too big for the river, it would also just go along the river, which is perfect. So now let's take a look at how we can take this cube and make it be something else. You can do that by just changing the cube to a different mesh. Or what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take a skeletal mesh, and I've got a boat model here, and I'm just going to put the boat in. This boat is absolutely huge, but a boat is what I want. So I'm going to compile this, and I'm going to come into my scene here, and we can see the boat. It is way too big right now. So I'm going to go into that and just set the skeletal mesh size here for my boat to be 1, 1, and 1. Relative to that, and now we have our boats. And with this I can take this boat and I can move it, and I can rotate it and place it absolutely anywhere that I want. I kind of want it just floating off the shore here. If I go ahead and press play, you can see the boat's going to sit in there now, and with that boat it's just going to be sitting there very nicely on that balancing point. And again, I can detach this, and I can just see here my boat is going to be very nicely just floating on the waves, which is absolutely perfect. Okay, now we have our boat in our scene. It's got a buoyancy point and it's looking absolutely fantastic. We should also know how to adjust our rivers, how to adjust our ocean, and be ready to make some really, really cool stuff using water. I'd love to hear what you've been doing in the comments down below with this water system, or even send us pictures over in our Discord. If you'd like to support more high quality training just like this, be sure to check out our Patreon page and unlock exclusive perks such as early access to our videos, live mentoring, and easy to use game templates. That's it for this video though, I hope you have enjoyed it. As always, stay awesome, keep creating. Virtus, signing out.